Hey, welcome to Stephen McGrath's Basscraft. So, thanks a lot to everyone who's ordered merch off me in the last week. I've 2 tees on the website now, and really appreciate that you're buying them because unlike most YouTubers or people that do podcasts, mine isn't just a picture on a website, and when you buy it, it gets printed in some random factory in China. I'm getting them screen printed here in Ireland, 50 at a time. They're coming to my house. I don't want them coming up around my ears like for the next 20 years and to be walking around like Homer Simpson wearing the same clothes. So really appreciate you buying the tees because I think they're cool, and you've been messaging me, you think they're cool. So let's keep releasing them and making them, and it's a bit of crack, sure, isn't it? And thanks for the tips that people have been putting in my tip jar and just generally messaging me and telling me you're digging the podcast. So all the descriptions for that kind of stuff is down below. Subscribe, like, share, all that crack. So I'm not going to do a long intro this week because you probably noticed this is a long episode, nearly 2 hours. Me and Scott Whitley were talking, and it kind of had to be a long one because he's had a very interesting bass journey. And as well as chatting about his bass journey and music, we also chatted about his recent diagnosis of ADHD. And I think for all those musicians, like, it's coming up to 12 months now of this COVID situation, and we're all kind of getting a bit introspective because we live these nomadic lives of being on tour and moving all the time, and when you're moving you're not really thinking about what's going on, you're just going to the next thing and you never take stock. And we've had 12 months now of taking stock, so I think we all have things going on in our lives, and we're all thinking about what way we want things to be in the future. So I hope it really helps listen to Scott's story about how his diagnosis has helped him and how he's so, excited about the future, and this has been transformative for him, to be able to take this 12 months to think about all these things. And he's even after setting up a Facebook group called Musicians Helping Musicians, and it is what it is. It's a private group where musicians can just chat to each other and about what's going on, the kind of stuff you wouldn't put in public, but it's cathartic to get out there and talk about. And I put all these links in the description, and of course Scott actually has an EP coming out, and there's an Indiegogo campaign that's nearly over, so pop over and throw him a few bucks, and his new EP will be out soon. I just heard the new single, it sounds class. He's got a great singing voice actually, which I didn't know, so fair play, Scott, you're putting me to shame because I won't be releasing any singing ever. So enjoy the episode, guys. 2 weeks off, listen to all the episodes, keep messaging me, keep buying the merch, liking, sharing, all that crack, and see you soon. So have you got lessons today, or is your schedule fairly open?
I've got one today at 2, but I'm guessing that's like loads of time, right? I mean,
yeah. I think an hour 90 something minutes was the longest one, so no, we won't go over the 2 hour mark.
Right, no.
But it's great to have you on. I was checking out your YouTube. Well, I've been following you for years anyway. I just realised I wasn't subscribed though, so I subscribed there. But trust me, I have watched your channel for years. I must just never have tickled the subscribe button or whatever you say.
I can't follow you. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're getting back into the double thumbing. You were saying, did you take a step away from it for a while, and now you're kind of getting back into it?
Well, it's like the double thumb technique kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you should mention that because it sounds like I'm going off on a complete tangent, but
tangents are what we're here for.
And I'm a professional at that. But through teaching, doing a bit more one-to-one recently. Like one of the things that came up yesterday was. I won't go into the specifics of what I was teaching, but the guy I was teaching, he kind of thought he reached a brick wall, and he was like, right, we can't do any more until I get this nailed and we move on. And the reason I'm saying this is, I don't know about yourself or other people like that, but I find that it's all kind of cyclic, like you do a lot of work on something, and I think you just feel like you do reach that point where you think, I don't really think I can push this anymore at the minute. Yeah. I'm kind of, and then it kind of just goes into the toolbox, and then you just either do other things or work on other things. And so it's a bit like that. Yeah, you know, the double thumb thing was something that fascinated me when I heard Wooten doing what he does.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time, you know, I don't know, what was that, like 20 years ago, something like that, you know, trying to get that that nailed, that thing. And then, yeah, just kind of, I kind of reached that point where it was like, I don't think I can, you know what I mean? No amount of practice seemed to be pushing it any further. So I kind of just went on to other things. And then, yeah, just recently I thought, oh, you know, and the thing is when you come back, I think, to those things, you've kind of been using them here and there, just, you know, and then you realise, wow, you know, I've actually got a lot better at this. And so the second time round is, you know, it's, I think then you can take it further, you know?
Yeah. And did you find a practical use for it, like we'll call in real bass plays, like playing, like obviously it's really cool when you're doing solo stuff, but if you use it in real band situations as well, like maybe if you aren't really good at pick playing, you could emulate a pick playing sound with the double thumb technique.
Yeah, I've definitely found it useful. So, you know, there might be... So I play a lot with, like, my default thing is playing with fingers, really. Funny that, you know, the last two bands I've played in use pick almost exclusively, but that's because it's right for the gig. But, so yeah, you know, I don't know. If I'm playing a tune where it's like constant dum 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 dum, like eights for like, you know, like 6 minutes or something, and the hand starts cramping up or whatever, then, you know, you can, without sounding like Wooten or something, you know, without going into that space, you can totally, you know, start using that, dum, 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 and, you know, it'll kind of, so I've used it as that, you know, like to get me out of a spot, you know, kind of thing. And then just kind of, yeah, I've used it just on like funk things. If, you know, if I'm playing a funk thing, you know, I might kind of, you know, just, like you say, use it in the same way you might a pick, kind of, you know, you can get that really percussive thing. So yeah, it's definitely, it's like, you know, you put an awful lot of work into these things and then just use it here and there.
You get a tiny
but it's
bit
great when you can, isn't
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've a load of kind of strumming and slap techniques in my bag from when I was a teenager in funk metal band I was in, and I've been a blues rock band now, so about 1% of the time I get to throw in some of those techniques, but they're still in the tool bag, you know, I can still use them.
Yeah, but it's really, I think that's really cool, you know, because, you know, like I said a minute ago, these techniques, and along with like music theory and I think, you know, there's so much studying, you know, goes into that stuff to quite often, you know, for most of us anyway, like gigging musicians, just use it for like one bar here or one, you know, like these tiny little windows of opportunity, you know. But having said that, you know, I think, funnily enough, it is those tiny things. Like, what was that track? There was a CeeLo Green thing like a number of years ago. That is it called "Forget You"? Whatever, you know the one I mean. Like,
oh yeah. And I think that was the radio. The real version was you, and they changed it for the radio.
So funny, I know. But you know, there's that like, is it like one bar or something of this quite tasty bass lick. You know, and the whole world was going, man, my God, have you heard this track? Like, have you heard it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it does make an impact. You know, those little, I mean, you wouldn't think it would in this sea of, you know, like 2-year-old bass players that scroll up past your newsfeed who are better than anything you've ever seen before. But it does, you know, in the you know, in the world out there kind of thing, in like you say, you know, pop, blues, whatever. Just those little nuggets to be able to pull them out of the bag. It really does make an impact, I think.
I think
so. It is worth it.
The song that really was big for that was "Call Me Al," wasn't it? That was kind of had the slap bass break in it, and then you had to play it in cover bands, and there was probably loads of bass players going, "I don't do slap bass," but you're in a wedding band, and they're saying, "We want the slap break."
That's it. Yeah, definitely. You know, yeah. But so it's it is those little things that really stand out. And excuse me, you know, the number of times I've heard players, and I guess it's happened to me, you know, where you're just playing something and you just throw a little thing in, and because you've done all that studying, you've got all this stuff to draw on, you can do it. You know, people, what? How did you do that? What was it? Do you know what I mean? And it does have an impact, but you've just got to use it judiciously, should we say? That's a good word. I think
that is a good word.
Is that the right word?
Well, I'd say so. It sounds good anyway. But I find if you listen back to your, like, if you record, like, you're not doing it with any big purpose. If you record a bunch of gigs you do, like long gigs, and then listen back, there's some cool stuff that you'll play that you never would have made up at home, because you're you've separated that practice brain away and you're just doing the gig. And when you do some tasty fills and shapes, and you can transcribe yourself, which is something some people probably don't think of doing. It's a good idea to do that. Do you ever do that kind of thing?
To a degree. Sorry, excuse me. I could have guaranteed I set that to silent, but I did. It turns out my watch doesn't want to be silent too. Sorry about that.
The not so smart smartwatch. That's what's happening.
That's it. Like, I'm a little bit. If I'm honest, I'm a little bit too. I'll just say lazy. You know, there's a lot of value in what you're saying. You know, and I also believe there's a lot of value even in the practice. You know, when you're just noodling away to record stuff and then listen back. Wow, what was that? But I know I should do it, and it's a great idea. But no, I probably could have progressed like that if I'd have done that. You know. But it's definitely a great idea, you know, and kind of the improvising things is a big part of who I am and what I do. You know, I got into that really early. I probably do, like you say, more, you know, better composition, if you like, on the spot on a gig than maybe sat down, you know, in a room on my own or whatever. But yeah, I've certainly listened back. I'll tell you what has happened. I don't know if you've had this. Same but different is. You can't, because you're kind of constantly evolving, and like I say, like that cyclic practice thing. You know, you work on this, and then timing, and then tone, and then slap, whatever. You know, I listened to a recording of a gig I did maybe 10 or 15 years ago, or if you go back even further, and it's literally like listening to someone else. You know, you're so disconnected from me. You're like, I don't think I could do that now, was it? You know what I mean? It sounds like, and I don't know if you've had that at all, you know, listening to like a really old recording.
Yeah, I have.
You know,
when I was like when I was big into the slap stuff, if I listen back to some of that now, and I'd be thinking, no, I wouldn't be able to do that, and I wouldn't put into practice to do it either, like, because I'm not really as much into it as I used to be. But that's the teenage brain, isn't it? You kind of get stuck into one style of music and nothing else gets in. You just have like tunnel vision. I just want to do this one thing. And you had that moment with Mark King, I think, wasn't it? You got in, you saw him playing, and it was just like blew your mind seeing what he can do.
Yes. Like. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and put an awful lot of work in those early years. And like, funny enough, that kind of like tunnel vision thing, oddly enough, it is something that I still kind of have today. You know, it's kind of, it's a blessing and a curse. You know, it's kind of like on the one hand, I'll kind of, you know, really hyper focus on one thing at once, which is great because it means I'm still like moving forwards. But at the same time, you know, everything else in life's just going piling up around me. Do you know what I mean?
I'm the same.
But that. The other thing I was going to say is I think that so like when you're younger and you start playing, you're starting from like a blank canvas. There's nothing, you know, and then you put a lot of work in, and then this is like everything you have, and it's new to you as well. You know, you as a player, you know, you're like, oh, I can do this now, you know, or whatever it is. And then, like, for me, I mean, I like hit 50 last year. God, cry. I told you I was tired, didn't I? Hit 50. There is a big difference between yesterday and last year. I understand that. And, it's what I found in me, I don't know if other people can relate to this, is that you know, all those things I just talked about that you learned years ago, you just kind of take for granted. They're just kind of part of what you do now. And so you're constantly trying to stretch. And I find myself looking at what I do and go, well, you know, it's just like, you know, it's kind of nothing. You know what I mean? It's like, I need to be like this guy. And you can't be objective. And then, again, I mean, I know I mentioned it before, doing a bit more teaching recently, one-to-one, is that they're starting from where I was, you know, all those years ago. And they're like, what I mean, what did you do there? And I'm like, what? You know, it'd be like nothing. It'd be something I don't even realise I did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying in short is I remember Victor Wooten years ago in an interview, he said, he was asked, what are you working on at the minute? And he said, I'm working on trying not to sound like Victor Wooten, you know?
That's good.
And I thought, yeah, I know what you mean, you know?
He's brilliant.
Do you know
for
what I
those
mean?
things,
Like,
isn't he? He had another one
Absolutely.
where he was talking about learning Portrait of Tracy, and his kind of thing he said it's kind of like, you know, when you make orange juice, you know, when you get the cordial and you drop in a tiny drop and it makes a pint of orange juice, and you have the full bottle, and so he said he learned Portrait of Tracy, but it was like only a drop of I don't even know if this is what he said, but this is pretty much the same analogy, but my version. So the drop of Portrait of Tracy opened the entire world of harmonics to him. He just needed that one drop, and then everything opened up. All the harmonics on the whole bass was opened up, and that's everything he ever learned about harmonics in that one session. So
yeah, completely relate to that. Completely, yeah. And funnily enough, the same thing happened to me with him. You know, so like I'm completely self-taught, and I would say everything, technique-wise anyway, I've ever learned was either by ear, you know, just trying to like find, you know, watching videos. I mean, back in the 80s, the old Betamax and VHS. In fact, that's how I learned to do Mark King's triplets, you know, his mega fast triplets. I was like, what's he doing? And I remember literally watching it frame, this is really sad, frame by frame, going with the bass, like, so he's doing that. And okay, you know, and it worked it out. I was like, no freaking way, right? You know, and nobody knew how to do it back then, you know, so it was really cool. But getting back to Wooten, he was probably the first player where, you know, I saw him doing his thing, you know, doing the sort of fast, sort of almost classical sounding stuff in things like Classical Thump and that famous arrangement of Amazing Grace. And I just I could not fathom it. I couldn't see it. I couldn't even, do you know what I mean? It was like, I can't even see what is happening. And he's probably the only player where I kind of gave in and bought his transcription book. I don't tend to, so nothing against transcription books, obviously. But for me personally, I like to work it out myself so I know it's right.
You couldn't get his stuff by ear. You weren't able to get it exactly.
No, I couldn't. I was like, what is going on? You know, I could hear this kind of triplet thing, right? But I'm like, I couldn't see it. Yeah. And so, yeah, I bought his book, and the same thing, right? There was a bit of the solo in Sinister Minister, a track he does with...
I love that solo, yeah. It's like a bass break.
Good.
So cool, yeah.
I mean, that solo in itself was like, that's the first thing I ever heard of Wooten, you know, just blew my mind. And so there was that, and a bit of Classical Thump, and it was the same thing. That was enough to, like, I get it. I'm not saying I could do it, but I get it. I understand. You know, I didn't use any of the rest of the book, and I wasn't particularly fussed for, like, playing his pieces, just knowing what was going on. And, you know, for anyone that's looked into that, a lot of it is this kind of, like, open string and then hammering on, like, really high up. You know, I wouldn't have thought to involve something down at the nut there, you know, when I'm playing up above the 12th fret, but that's a lot of how he's getting that stuff. And yeah, like same thing, it was like that tiny little thing, and like, right, and then you can just expand on it, and I use it loads now, you know. Yeah.
Whitley. And you started on guitar, did you, back in the day? No, you were in a band, was it? And then was it the typical story, they needed a bass player and they made you play the bass? Was that how it started out?
Completely. Yeah, completely. There was...
I'm still waiting for the guest that didn't start that way. I'm still waiting for the guest that... Well, I went straight to bass myself, but...
really?
No one forced me to. I just kind of...
What's wrong with you?
I know, yeah. But I'm still waiting for the guest that wasn't forced to play the bass because all his friends were better on guitar than him or something like that.
Well, that's totally, no need to expand it. It's totally that story, you know. I played a bit of drums as well. I was kind of like torn between the two. You know, I was the two coolest instruments I thought at the time, and ended up on bass. But yeah, and then as you said, there was the Mark King moment, you know, which I think happened to a lot of people in that era. You know, it was like I remember coming home from school, and funnily enough, I was into a lot of 60s music and that, you know, Beatles, Who, things like that, Kinks. I wasn't listening to a lot of current stuff. I was really into the Police. And let me just... there we go. I was really into the Police, but apart from that, like I say, I was a little bit out of touch. And I came home from school this one day, and there'd been. Do you remember have you seen the Princess Trust concerts? It was like there was always this right in the 80s, this mega all-star house band. You know, it'd be like Eric Clapton and Phil Collins and things like that. And so there'd be like bands on and solo artists as well, supported by this house band. And Level 42 had been on one, and my dad recorded it. He said, "Did you see Level 42 last night?" And this was like 1985 or 6. And I'm like, "No, who are they?" You know what I mean? I should have known. I think it was 15, 16 at the time. And he said, "Oh, I'll put it on for you." And he put it on. And funnily enough, actually, he'd recorded, he played me this section, and it was 2 bands back to back. And the first band was Big Country, funnily enough, who I'm actually playing with now. That's just a weird little coincidence. So I watched those 2 tracks, and then Level 42 came on, and I just remember it was the same as like when I heard that Wooten. I was just like, what? Like, hey, wow, bass. I didn't know bass could be this cool,
Did you put the tape on your thumb to copy Mark King, wrap it up?
I've certainly tried it a bunch of times, I can't deny, and then washed it off. It's like a sticky mess. Yeah, I was like well into it, and I bought most of their albums, probably on either cassette or or vinyl, and later CD, and and then that sort of led me into I don't know how I made the connection, because back then obviously no internet, none of that thing going on, so that there were like, if you spoke to other people like in the know, right, there were like, I don't know, 5 or 6 bass players in the world that kind of were doing this. I mean, obviously there were more, but that you knew of.
Yeah, it's like these days, the whole internet is full of these people who show this virtuosic bass style. But back then, it was just those handful of names, I'm sure. Like,
exactly. So there was King, there was Jacko, obviously, Stan Clark, and then there were Stu Ham, Billy Sheehan, and even guys like kind of. So they were the main guys, really. And then you've got like guys like Larry Graham, and I mean, it sounds terrible, but nobody I knew, was really talking about James Jamerson and, like I say, even Larry Graham and that. They were they're the old guys, like.
And I'm sure Pino was big, probably because he was on the Paul Young records at the time. Like.
Pino massive as well, yeah. I could have forget that, and so I learned, like in isolation, really, like pretty much everything. From this kind of like I had 1 Jacko album, 2 Stan Clark albums, 3 actually, sorry. A couple of recordings of Pino because he played with Gary Newman, early on. I don't know if you've heard any of that stuff.
I don't know. I haven't checked that out at all.
Some unbelievable bass playing on Gary Newman records. Yeah, early Gary Newman. Just amazing, because I think the other guy was Joe Hubbard that played with him a lot.
Usually your man who invented the Chapman stick, Tony Levitt. I've only heard him. I've heard mainly him playing with Peter Gabriel, his stuff.
Right, yeah. Fantastic players, So, yeah, and so that was it. And I remember, and it sounds like, I don't know what it sounds, big-headed, I don't know, but I genuinely, worked really hard because I only knew of these guys, at playing that kind of stuff. And, back then it seemed almost tangible that, if you worked really, really hard, you could be in that. There's nobody doing it. It's a niche, you know what I mean? Yeah. And, so it was almost seemed like a tangible thing, and that's really interesting because now, like you say, the internet is just all of that stuff. It's insane. It's kind of really inspiring and kind of depressing at the same time. It's inspiring, but it does put you in a different place. You start to go.
Still is kind of tangible though. Like when you consider the population of the world and everyone has access to the internet, if you are that style of bass player, you're probably still going to be one of the best in your country. Maybe you can't say you're the best in the world anymore without a shadow of a doubt. Remember when I don't know if you've read Jacko's biography. He used to love telling people I'm the best bass player in the world, but he was. Yeah. He actually was, so he could back it up. But, but I'm sure if you get to that level, you probably will be one of the best bass players in your own country. But of course, there'll be someone on the internet better than you. Like,
yeah, that's it. And then it was probably easier to quantify better
Yeah,
best,
and even what does that even mean?
then.
What's better? Or who's? It doesn't even make sense when it comes to music. Anyway, you can only
Certainly
quantify
not
it when
now.
it comes to like the sports of who can play faster and things. You can quantify that, but you can't quantify music really. Like,
no, you can't. And it's see, this is again, this is where it becomes difficult to be objective about yourself. So because you get so used to what you can do. I mean, not one gets so used to what one can do that you kind of you can't. I think I speak for most people. It becomes difficult to almost see what's good about your playing, and so you think what it needs to be is like I need to be faster, or I need to be cleaner, or I need to be and you're working at all this stuff, and of course that's a thing if it's in your remit, like. But what I'm finding more and more, I mean, this is so cliched to say it, but it's so right, is that you've first and foremost you've got to be the best Scott Whitley or Steve or whatever you can be. That's where it's at. In other words, somebody throws me a set of changes, in G with the funk groove or whatever, and said play something over that. I'm gonna completely play something different to the next guy over here. So you're always going to be unique. That's the first thing. But the other thing is that, and this is for me personally, but I think it's universal. I've lately been messing around with piccolo bass a bit more. It's something I've dabbled with for ages. So it's like, obviously like playing bass in a solo, if you like, register or melodic, And I listen back to what I'm doing, and I'm almost like that sounds really bad, viewers, but I'm surprising myself going, that sounds really beautiful, and what I'm saying is, the bit that's probably the best about my playing is nothing to do with all that speed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The bit that maybe speaks to people. Right, yeah. I hope that makes sense.
It does, yeah. Have you checked out your man, Xander Zahn? He's actually an English guy on YouTube.
Yeah.
He does a lot of stuff on the piccolo bass. It's almost like you start asking, what does a bass guitar even mean? Because his strings are the same gauge as guitar strings, and he's using what you call an ebow and stuff like. But it's cool the direction you can go with that instrument.
Very cool. I've checked his stuff out, and he's got. I remember watching him quite early on in his career kind of thing, and I remember. Because I think maybe I just started dabbling with the piccolo thing. I remember the first time I tried it, I just got a Shortscale bass, and I got some guitar strings, the bottom four off a set, threw the other two away, and I remember tying bits of string on the end to make them long enough to go to go around the peg, and then I saw that guy, and then I discovered you could buy actual piccolo strings, but I think he plays a long scale because everything sounds really under tension. It's got that beautiful, rich tone about it,
Yeah, it doesn't. It sounds otherworldly and completely not like a bass guitar the way when he plays it or whatever scale length he's in. Like,
yeah, completely. But the way I've sort of always approached it is a bit more like. So, for example, if anyone has not heard the album, there's two. There's Hideaway by Stanley Clarke. And what's the other one? Time Exposure.
Is he not playing a piccolo on school days?
Well, he may be. I mean, this is a funny thing, right? The two albums, those two albums, Time Exposure and Hideaway, were the ones I got first because they were brand new albums when I was getting into this. So I'm guessing like 85, 86. A lot of people, a lot of musos didn't rate the albums that much because there's a lot of like drum machine stuff going on there, a lot of synth bass. But within that, there's this astonishing bass playing going, beautiful playing, and a lot of it, the really high register stuff, is piccolo bass. And no, I got into School Days. I bought that. When I said there was two albums, and then I went, no, actually I had three. The third was School Days. I bought School Days. Like I approached him in reverse to everybody else. Right? I got these two albums that everyone hated, loved them, then bought School Days and went, I'm not keen on this. Right?
That was kind of the
really
pre-internet
weird
days, though, wasn't it? Because you'd obviously get the best album. You just Google it, but you often would get an obscure album from a band, and you'd get into it because you haven't got the bias of being told that's not the good album. You should listen to this other one.
That's it. But the funny thing is, having said all that, it still stands with me. Is that School Days is cool, and it like has that kind of pioneering thing going on about it, but I still, funny enough, prefer the drum machine albums. It's really weird because part of that might be it's that playing, it's that piccolo thing that I'm tuning into, and think some of it's is it tenor bass as well? It's just nuts. It's just gorgeous. I reckon I got like about 80% of my playing from those two albums. Seriously. But what was I going to say? But School Days is, I don't know if he does much of the. I don't know. It sounds terrible. I'm going to get shot down for this, but I actually didn't listen to it that much, because it just didn't speak to me in the same way that these other things. And the other thing, sorry, just to throw in again, bit of a different, probably a different avenue into music. Before I was a player, as well as being into this 60s stuff, the only other exception was, this is really wacky, right? I was into breakdancing and BMX,
Nice
freestyling, right?
Any videos knocking around of you breakdancing?
I wish there were. I'll do one now if you want. Hang on. But there was... so I was into a lot of that electro kind of stuff, that kind of hip-hop-y kind of stuff. And so, like, that Stan Clark... I liked a lot of stuff from that era where you got, like, guys like Herbie Hancock, Rocket and all that vibe, where they were like great players but doing like really current stuff. I liked it a lot, and it's still kind of with me today. That it's still a big part of the way I kind of hear music and that.
Tony Williams played with a lot of those hip hop acts back in that period, and it was cool, the stuff that was coming out. Real interesting.
Yeah, I love that fusion between kind of electronic stuff and looped stuff and real playing. Some people go, It's all on bucket tape, as they say in Lancashire, where I'm from. But I love that fusion of sequence stuff and real playing. I still do. I think it's great.
Well, it was probably strange in the 80s. Everyone was being pushed into the synthesizers, so then people have went against it in the 90s. Wasn't that kind of what happened? If you were in a band, like even Rush had albums that almost had no bass playing, just all synths and keyboards, like. So people kind of rallied against it, didn't they? Then after the 80s, they were like, "Oh, I'm not having a synth. I don't want any of that electronic stuff. It's back to real instruments."
Yeah, it was a strange time, really, in a lot of ways. It was great. I think it needed to happen. The whole Britpop thing, for example. But it was kind of weird because I'd been like. You were talking earlier about, those early days when I saw Mark King and I practiced like every day for hours and hours. And, I had this head on of like, maybe I can be one of the best up there. And, and that was my goal. It's important to set goals like that. And then, like you say, the 90s happened and it was like, wait a minute. I could just like grab my postman who's never played bass in his life and say, "Will you just come in and put a track down for us?" Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll show you where you put your fingers. It's fine,
Yeah,
that sounds really disrespectful. Yeah, it sounds disrespectful to anyone that likes. I like a lot of that music, but it's definitely a thing. It was definitely a kind of a moment of like, right, okay. So what do I do now? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true. I had a student yesterday. Had a bunch of students on a call. And we were all naming bands, and they were naming like modern stuff like Dua Lipa, and great, loads of bass playing there, and Rage and Zeppelin. And then one of them says Oasis, and I was like, okay, this is a bass course. I was like, but I will be able to teach you something from Oasis. But when he said Oasis, no bass line jumped to my mind. I was like, I don't know. I suppose, but I will be able to teach him something using the Oasis still. Like, I think Noel actually plays the bass on a lot of the tracks, so they do follow the guitar quite closely. But that was the bass wasn't to the front in that style of music, really, was it? Like,
no, it wasn't. And like I say, it sounds awful to say, and it's one of those things that because I'm into what I'm into, a lot of people who know me more on like a local level or whatever. Excuse me. If I ever get to like a jam night back in the day, like when you could do this kind of thing.
PC, pre-COVID.
Exactly. If there were like a few muso mates down there and stuff, that was always my opportunity to try the silly stuff. Not like if I'm backing a singer who's trying to do a tasteful job of like Summertime or something. But, if we're like doing an instrumental, you go for it. That's your time to let loose and have fun. And but of course, a lot of people that would know me for that would be like, don't book him on a country gig for God's sake. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But of course, when that kind of session comes along, I play exactly what's right for the song and enjoy it. So all I'm saying is, there's obviously that was the right kind of approach for that stuff, bass playing wise. It would have been crazy to do anything else, but it's still, it was just the fact that it was so easy to do that it wasn't really. I knew right there and then that it's like, well, there's not. I don't know. Career choices, are they even there anymore?
Yeah.
And it did force me into just like up to that point. It was like that was my career. That was it. I was going to be a professional bassist. From being 15, it was like that's what I decided, and that was it. And then all of a sudden, it's like, right, okay, well, I'll be a computer salesperson then. And I did about 5 years of that kind of stuff.
Really, you stepped away from music altogether.
Well, not altogether. I mean, it was a mix of a few things. I mean, I got married and, and all that sort of domestic side of
photography
things.
as well. Was it you do that kind of professionally as well, pictures and stuff?
I would like to. I mean, that's something that came later.
Oh, okay.
That came like, I've always been interested in it. But back then, no, it was kind of, it was a mix of, I couldn't really see how in demand like bass players were going to be at that point, and I suppose because the stuff that was current at that time didn't need a great deal of skill, that would mean there would be like more people able to do it, so the competition's more, and so that plus just getting married. You know what? I'm gonna have a go at doing a proper job.
The 9 to 5.
Yeah. And I tried a bunch of stuff. Hired and fired every 2 minutes. Tried my best, but it just it just wasn't me, I'd like come home, I mean, like embarrassed to say, but, in tears and stuff, because I was like really giving it my best shot, and it just wasn't working, and, and I couldn't relate to anybody because they weren't musicians, and, and so, but then it was funnily enough, because again, like bearing in mind, no internet, all you'd get, unless you're really in touch, you got mates that like go to, record shops and buy imports and stuff, which I didn't really, Well, actually, I had one guy. He was the guy that introduced me to Victor Wooten, and I'm guessing that was 86 or 87 or something when he played me that stuff. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. When's this from? Like 89, something like that. He said, no, it's brand new. I'm like, what? Hang on. Stop the world, what?
Yeah.
You're saying there's people still making music like this now? And he's like, yeah. And I honestly didn't know. I honestly did not know that, I thought like Britpop had come along and that was it.
Yeah.
But, and that, it was like a light bulb moment, literally life changing. It was like, hang on a minute. Because I realized that in the States, yeah, there's the charts and stuff, and back then, there were the charts. But outside of that, these huge scenes where people, I mean, I think that's always been the case with metal, hasn't it? I think there's always been like a metal scene.
Metal has, I love the metal scene. For me, it inspires me. I'm into metal, but also what inspires me is there is this really strong scene, but it evolves. Like, if you listen to what's the big metal at the moment or what's popular, it doesn't sound like Black Sabbath, but they all still love Black Sabbath, but they're not clones of Black Sabbath. It's always evolving and moving on. I wish more music genres could take that sample, act like that and be like that. But yeah, there's always an underground metal scene. It never kind of falters.
No, and that's the thing, I certainly don't believe, I know, actually, I'm going to put that out there. I know that wasn't the case for the kind of stuff I was into or the direction I was going in the UK, but it seemed like it was in the States. So, but that was enough just to make me think. And I think around this time, the internet had just started to become a thing, because I literally wasn't joking when I mentioned computer sales, by the way. 1995, I was
some
working
powerful computers, serious RAM on them.
That's it. I was working in Burnley Computer Centre as a computer salesperson, and that was the year, of course, Windows 95 came out. It's the only reason I remember what year it was. And it was. There was a thing we sold on the shelves, and I picked it up, and it was like CompuServe, this software. CompuServe, what's this? Well, it was an internet provider, So I was like, this is amazing. What do you mean? Like, you can connect to different computers and stuff, and, So I was on the internet probably way before I would say the majority of people in the world. And
I'd say the 2000s is when I first got on the internet, so you're well ahead of the game there.
Yeah, it was really early. There were like about 3 retailers on there. There was Dixon's and a couple of others, and you're like, oh, and they had about 3 products, not joking, that they'd advertise. You're obviously like just trying this thing out, and you click on it, and it'd take like 15 minutes for this picture of a TV to load up.
It was going like rectangles, doom, 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 and eventually it would be loaded.
That's it. You weren't going to buy your TV that way, that's for sure. But the point being, I think really early on, because even in the 80s, I was into like computing and stuff. And I remember like modems, you put a phone into this thing and it would speak to another computer. So I knew it was I was always fascinated with that. And now this internet thing, I'm thinking, man, this could be the future. This could be something where I could have an outlet. This was all happening around the same time. It was like I'd not long heard about Wooten, and I'd not long been on the internet, and I thought, this is kind of cool. And not long after that, there was a thing called, it still exists, but it's different. It was called mp3.com. And back then, it was a site where artists could upload their music. And then, I suppose it may be a little bit like Bandcamp is, that kind of vibe, but really early on. So that you uploaded your music. And as the thing got bigger, they started to give you like payback for playback, and they would produce CDs for you, so you could upload your stuff. People could buy your CD. They did all the thing. They'd like produce a CD, packaged it, sent it out, that kind of thing, and you split the profit. But this was really early. I'm hazarding a guess at late 90s, something like that.
Cool. I never heard of this at all. This is new to me. Like
mp3.com, and I ended up like quite high in the mp3.com charts with a few of my like instrumental things and stuff. And I'm still in touch with some of those bass players. There were like a handful of us, it seemed like, who were doing the same sort of thing, kind of in competition, but kind of egging each other on, you know. And and like I say, I'm still in touch with some of those guys today. But the whole thing, I don't know what happened. It disappeared. Well, it's not. It's something else now. I don't really know what it is. It's not what it was. They kind of got in touch and said bye.
It's over. The dream is over.
Yeah, that's it. We're not paying you anymore. Bye.
Well, MySpace was brilliant as well, and then it just died out. But a lot of people made connections for life on that website when it was good. Like we were all. Yeah. That was my first experience uploading music, and I was in a punk band at that time. Oral Ammunition, taken from a class song.
Right.
And we were getting in contact with punk bands all over the world, and it was real organic and natural, and it worked really well. But then the arse just fell out of it, and it was gone overnight. Yeah. Just what happens, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's interesting. It's but like great to have got in, at those early stages of this stuff, and like you say, just that organic making connections. I mean, that in itself, for me was nuts. It's like, just the idea that I'm like talking to some musician in like Nashville or something like that, we're just like friends over, it's like, this is insane. Of course, people, well, you say that, I mean, people take it for granted now, but, excuse me. But having said that, maybe I think I take it for granted, but I don't. I mean, it's like yesterday I was doing Skype lessons. I taught a guy in Colne, which is 5 minutes down the road.
I've been there.
And then I taught a guy in Vancouver after him, and earlier on in the day it had been Roswell, New Mexico. And it still kind of like blows my mind.
Even now we're sitting here having a conversation. You're in Lancashire, I'm in Tipperary. It's just
exactly.
Like, you don't get kind of used to it, really, do you? Like it still is amazing. Or maybe that's just for people we're not digital natives. So maybe if you are digital natives, you aren't amazed by it, but we kind of still are, I guess.
Yeah, and I love it. It's really cool. But yeah, it's funny how the online thing continues to evolve. I mean, like my YouTube channel, for example, it was just an accident, really. Not completely. They didn't just fall onto YouTube, out of nowhere. But it was that I'd been, one of the things that I'd done in the past is I taught at college for a long time. and then it just kind of ran its course, really, no pun intended. And I left. You know, they changed the way they were doing things. They offered us. They said we're not doing. That's what it was. They said we're not doing instrumental tuition anymore. But you got the chance of doing classroom stuff. Well, I'd done some of that. I'd done music tech. I taught like classes like 20, 30, doing music tech and things like that. But it wasn't really where my head was at. I didn't really want to become a classroom teacher. I enjoyed doing the one-to-one stuff, you know, kind of passing on the information and seeing it blossom, you know. But it wasn't really for me, so I made that jump. And then I've just put some videos on YouTube to try and get some students. I thought what I can do is put a little bit of a web page together. And if I make some videos, like sample lessons, I can put them on there, and then hopefully I'll get some, you know, local one-to-one tuition. And it didn't really work. I think I got about 2 views, and that was it, you know. And I just left them there. I think there were about 4 videos or something like that, and I called them Slap Basics, double S. My God. Anyway, yeah. I did.
Oh,
and
bass players love that kind of stuff. Alliteration.
Yeah, that's it. You know, and I just kind of left them there, and then years later, I can't remember how many years later, you know, my phone started pinging, and you know, thanks so much for these lessons. I've been trying to get into slap all my life, and this is the only thing that's helped. And I'm like, what? Hang on, you know. And it just went mad, you know. They just kind of like started coming through more and more, and the obviously it was really flattering, but it was also really nice, you know, to think like, no, you know, surely not like this lad from Burnley with a thick, you know, Lancashire accent or whatever. He's helping. Do you know what I mean? It was like I couldn't get my head around it, and. But it seemed genuine, so I made more videos, you know, and it just kind of continued to be like that positive response. So yeah, it's something that I've kind of, you know, I've not worked constantly at. I've not had the opportunity to yet, really, but yeah, but I built it up, and it's, you know, I think it's like close to 19,000 subscribers, which is not. It's not, you know, massive into, you know, compared to some of the YouTubers, but for me personally, it's amazing. You know, it's just incredible.
Well, you have a real strong community, which is, if you were more of a channel that was kind of, how would you say, like maybe clickbaity, or kind of you just make one-off videos that people will watch and forget, but yours is more, they want to know you and they want to keep coming back to see how you teach. So you're building a community kind of, which leads into you're doing like a Patreon, and I didn't even know that this existed till this week, the YouTube member thing. I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, there's a YouTube membership thing. So where you can, I think if you channel, because I got in really early with YouTube and stuff, I ended up getting quite a few, what's the word, privileges, if you like. That now you have to have, I don't know, 30,000 subs before you get this privilege and that privilege, you know, and like monetizing the site and stuff like that. So one of the things that I saw was you can have channel membership. So yeah, it's just that thing where, and I've tried to work this way because of the way I've been a little bit sporadic with my videos and stuff. You know, I've never had the opportunity to be like, right, you know, every week the video goes out and that's it. What I've always tried to base it on is, look, if you've had a lot of value from what I'm doing, you know, then, like, you know, if you want to contribute, then you can do it this way, that kind of thinking, right? And that's what it is. The channel membership is like, if you're kind of coming back to the channel and, you know, and you're getting a lot of value from it, then, you know, you're not paying for anything specific, but you can just, like, I think it can be from like $1 a month or something like that. You can just basically just give me something back.
Very,
you know,
very like Patreon kind of. Well, Patreon, you can give stuff back, or just not. They're just saying thanks, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So it is more on those lines. It is more like just saying thanks. The Patreon itself, I'm looking to build that as well, and actually finally, you know, hopefully get some content together that I can give back that's not just public. You know, that's always been difficult with touring and all the rest of it. And then, you know, when I come home, you know, if I've been away for 2 weeks, I probably just want to go on a bike ride with my wife rather than... Right, yeah. So I know I've been away for 2 weeks, love. I'm going in the studio now to make 6 months of video. You know, do you know what I mean? I've never really...
It's not practical, really, like, to do that.
It's hard. So, and you know, it'd be wonderful, you know, if I'd have crossed that line and I could, say, make an income from doing what I do here and then not have to tour, but I'm certainly not there. So... But yeah, it's kind of cool. There was a link there. I've forgotten what I was going to say, but yeah, I'll tell you what it was. No, it's gone. It's gone again.
Oh, don't worry. Well, you've got
More
a really
coffee needed.
You've a serious CV here, like, so we've a lot to cover. So I really want I really want to talk about the Chowney basses, and just generally you're interested in kind of quirky basses, which probably led you to your signature Chowney bass, and also where can people get it? Because I was kind of looking at it and I was like, I couldn't find a link to buy one. So maybe you could tell us about that.
Right. Okay. So in short. That was not meant to be a pun. I can't believe I just did that in short. Wow.
You said you need a coffee, but you obviously don't, because you're just firing the puns out. You could be doing... Did you ever think of getting a job for the Sunday Mirror or something, doing the puns, you know, the headlines?
Maybe that's what I should have done, yeah. So, yeah, early on, I don't know, I was like 23 or something, went into Forsyth's Music in Manchester, and picked up a Dan Electro Longhorn bass, which are short scale, right? And didn't even plug it in, just played it acoustically. And the thing that hit me was how easy the left hand was, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm really struggling with a long scale, but it was that you didn't have to move at all, you know, right down at sort of like F sharp, second fret kind of vibe. It was just so accessible and fast, and the string spacing was quite small. And I thought, that's really cool. You know, I'd love a bass like, you know, with that scale that gives me everything that, say, I've got from, you know, an active jazz or, you know, whatever I was playing at the time. And there wasn't anything. You know, you sort of looked up short scales, and they were all really quirky, which I like, but they were all very 60s sounding things, you know, like EBOs and like no top end or a pickup. A lot of short scale manufacturers put a pickup right next to the fingerboard. Yeah. I think it's just a kind of like it should have a sign on saying not for slapping, you know.
Yeah, well, that's I mainly use my 5 or short scale because it's one of those ones with the thing right up to the fretboard for that sound. Yeah. So I haven't really gone down the sound you get with yours, which is a new kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think that's the thing. Anyway, in short, I think people historically associate short scale mostly with a kind of tubby, deep,
McCartney,
60s.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's like the violin bass and stuff. And me being me, I always kind of think things out my own way. And what I think really was happening was that those were the only short scale available at the time, and that's what they sounded like. And then Fender, you know, the P bass, 34-inch scale. I mean, you can get like a vintage P bass and sound bang up to modern doing slap stuff, can't you? You know what I mean? It can sound crystal clear, right? You know, so they suddenly introduced this thing that probably just was like, my God, like, listen to that, you know? And I think what happened is that people just went, well, that's it, 34-inch. Yeah, you know, and that was it. Done deal. You know, we shall explore short scale no more, you know. And I really honestly think that's what happened, when in truth, if someone had gone, well, wait a minute, let's put that pickup in that place on a short scale version of it, you know, it probably would have sounded almost the same.
Yeah.
You know,
have you looked into the science of it much? Some people were saying about the frequencies and the fundamentals on a short scale. There's more bass and there's less of the other frequencies. So in some ways, it actually gives more bass than what we call a normal scale length bass. I don't know if you've explored that much.
So yes and no. You know, I never explore things generally in, you know, I never get scopes out and graphs, and generally anyway. You know, it's more of a use your gut, use your ears thing. But yeah, for me, it feels like it's more of a nice pokey kind of fundamental note that you get from a short scale. You know, it's very. There it is, you know, and you can get all that other harmonic stuff. It's just a little bit. I wouldn't say harder, but it's the strings really. You've got to. The strings makes a much bigger difference on a short scale. Sounds crazy, but it's true. To a long scale, you know, you could put I don't know. You could put any set of round wounds on a long scale. Get some cheap ones off Amazon, you know, whatever. And on day one, they're all going to sound pretty much the same. You know, you'll hear slight differences. But on a short scale, there are only like a handful of manufacturers that make strings that sound good on a short scale. It's really weird. They all change. It's, I don't know, again, talking into the science, it's all to do with the thickness of the core and all that. But anyway, that's where the difference is at. So much so that if anyone's watching this or listening and they want to get into Shortscale, you know, I don't know is it okay to like recommend a couple of brands?
Yeah.
You know,
work
like,
away. Yeah, sure.
So like,
if they want to send me some free stuff, I'll take it as well.
Yeah, GHS are fantastic. You know, and I've actually got a deal with those guys. I don't get them free, but you know, like,
not a brand that I ever use really, or that come up much. So that's a good one to hear. Like usually people recommend. Was it the Dario, and for flat ones they always say Tomastic, so I'm interested to hear what you think are the ones to try out.
Yeah, well, GHS are great, you know, absolutely great, and a great company as well. If you are an artist and you get in touch with them, they'll write back and you know they'll answer your questions and fantastic. So I use their what are they called now? I've got the Bright Steels, I think they're called. I'll get a packet in a minute anyway. So they use their steel round wounds. The flats are great as well, you know, so they're fab. The Dario, they're just insane. I mean, they're just mentally good, you know? I mean, so they're another one. They just sound so pure, so clear. They last a long time. So, and they're for my money anyway, get the lightest set you can that they do in Shortscale, and they sound amazing. And of course, like Tomastics are
I actually
fab
have
as
a set here ready to go on my just by Tomastic Shortscale.
There we go. Yeah, that's actually at the minute what I've got on. I've got a P base over there which has got those on, and but yeah, and like so other manufacturers like Rotor Sound, they make. I mean, they sound like Rotor Sounds. They're great, and on long scale. You know, if I can change them every day, I like them. You know,
yeah.
But for some reason, the shorter scale, it's something I need to speak. They've actually written to me about this. They saw an article I wrote about strings, and for some reason, their long scale strings sound great. The short scale strings, to me, do not sound great. They've got a lot of overtones. They don't sound very clear, and it is definitely down to the way that they produce them. Apparently. Back in the 60s, John Entwistle obviously had a big input in you know, the design, and he did in the short scale strings as well, and they've been made the same way ever since. And in short, if you're going to use Rotor Sound, get long scale and put them on your short scale, and just have to deal with just wrapping a bit of the fat bit around the peg, you know, and they'll sound great.
Cool. Yeah, I use Rotor Sound for rock bass. I have a 110 gauge on my low E, like really heavy, and that's good for rock playing. But yeah, I haven't played their short scale at all, like.
Yeah, the long scale are great, and even the long scale that's what makes them. They've got this kind of overtony richness to them, you know, and that's what makes them really bite, I think, and you know, they're great.
And how did the Chowney bass come about then? They're an English company. I'm not sure where in England they're based, but that's probably where the connection was it they approached you, did they, for like to make the signature?
Slightly different. Excuse me. Excuse me. Hang on. They right, so really try and pot this as quick as I can.
It's grand, seriously. They're used to these. Sometimes we're short, sometimes we're long, but everyone listening, I've yet to have a complaint about a podcast being too long or meandering. So it's probably just my listeners. We don't care. Look, it's grand.
Good. I'll just go and make another coffee. No. So yeah. You remember I said about the Dan Electron? Yeah, there was nothing that sounded the way I wanted it to, and had the features. You know, being really nerdy. If I'm honest, it made a feature list, 24 frets, active. You know, good bridge on it and whatever. So, the only one that did exist. My dream bass completely existed, by the way. At this point, it was just a starting price of like $17,500. Was kind of out of my range, and that's like the Stan Clark, you know, the Stanley Clark Alembic, right? Beautiful basses.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, just completely out of my price range. And even if I was to have one today, you can guarantee at some point it would get sold to buy a sports car or something, you know. So I can't hang on to that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a chance thing. I was like trolling eBay, and I saw this short scale, basically like a little Jazz. Looked like a short scale Jazz with a slightly different shaped body, and I thought, no way, that could be it. That could be what I've been looking for. So I ordered it. It was made by Richwood, which was just like sort of a brand name slapped on some Chinese-made basses, you know. There may be like other brand names of this bass out there. It came, I put some DiMarzios on it, an EMG preamp, and really funny, a Badass 2 bridge, which cost more than the bass.
And it probably was absolutely huge on the body as well.
It was hanging off the edge, actually. It literally was. But that bass blew my mind. It was insane. It was like, this is it, you know, pretty much. It just sounded fantastic. You know, I remember doing a blindfold test on like basschat.co.uk, something like that, one of the forums, and said, you know, like, I can't choose between which I like of these two basses the most. I'll call one bass 1 and one bass 2. Bass 1 was this, you know, £100 Chinese-built Shortscale, and bass 2 was an alembic. It wasn't a stand clock. It was one of the cheaper ones, but it was an alembic. You know, it's like certainly 2 or 3 grams worth of bass, and you know, and I wouldn't say one as such, but I think overall, the one that got the most votes probably was the cheap one. You know. And I was, because I needed that clarity, I needed that confirmation, because I'm like, right, this sounds better to me. This sounds like what I want to be using. Yeah. Right. But if I put pictures of those two and say, which should I use? What are people going to say, right?
There could have been confirmation bias. You were like, I want this to be better, so it is better. So you needed to ask some people what they thought. Yeah.
I actually thought I must be going crazy, you know. I thought it can't be, right? But I was like, I believe in it, but it can't be, you know. I need that confidence to know it's not just my ears, right? And then when I did the blindfold thing, that was a complete life-changing moment. It was like, right, I don't care anymore what it says on the headstock. I don't care where it's made. Apart from ethics, but you know what I mean. I don't care what it looks like. If it sounds, you know, it was just that kind of like, you know, affirmation that like, no, you're not going mad. Your ears are working. It does sound great, you know. And then I've just always just gone with my gut from there on in. But the only thing is, that bass was 90% my dream bass. The main thing that bugged me about it was it looked like a kid's bass, right? It was very small. You know, the body was like this tiny little thing, and it probably was built really for kids, and which I kind of enjoy for a bit. But then it starts bugging you. Like, are people like, why is he bringing that kid's bass again? You know, and you know, especially doing like higher profile gigs.
And they probably would think it sounds crap. They're like, oh, it looks crap, so it sounds crap. They're hearing with their eyes, kind of, you know.
It's a thing, totally. Yeah, you're right. So anyway, I got in touch with the company Richwood. I kind of got like a sort of endorsement thing really with them, which wasn't really what I wanted. What I wanted was them to kind of take these ideas I had, you know, sort of said, look, nobody's doing this. Nobody's making a Shortscale that fits this niche, right? If you do this and this, like make one with a 24 fret board, slightly bigger body, better bridge, active electronics. I said, you will clean up, you know, I knew it, right? And, you know, got nowhere with that. So I kind of put the idea out to different manufacturers, you know, other manufacturers. Nobody was interested. No, it's too much of a niche, the Shortscale thing. So I gave up. But by this point, I'd actually designed the thing. I mean, literally drawn it, you know, like the angled pickups thing, the shape of the headstock, everything, the width of the nut, the whole thing was completely designed. I'd got a full design together by this point. So I thought, well, I've got to have it built at least, right? So I got in touch with a friend called Brian Eastwood, who's a local guitar builder. Quite a legendary guy, actually.
I've heard him. It wasn't his studio that Scott Devine went to study in, was it? Luthery. No, it's not. Brian
is...
I've heard the name.
Yeah, he's a very... I don't think he'd be offended if I said this. He's a very quirky, eccentric kind of dude, you know, and that's what we love about him. And a lot of what he makes is you know, he makes really mad stuff, you know, like... there's the Blue Moon guitar that was it Schwaddy what he used or something like that, you know, and these really odd looking guitars and stuff, you know, and that's all his work. But yeah, you know, I went to him, I had the plans, and you know, and he built the first one, hand built it, and very alembic-y in its finish and stuff, fancy tone woods and stuff, and things like that. I had a trem on that one as well. That was another thing I always wanted. And it's a beautiful thing. It's an absolutely wonderful thing, and that's the first ever SWV1, right? And like I say, I'd given up on anyone taking it on as a project, you know. I mean, now I could probably do like a crowdfunding thing, but
yeah,
you know,
yeah, actually, that would have been way forward. But back then, that wasn't popular, really, was it? Like,
no, you know, people have changed the way that they think about that. So anyway, I just started using it on my channel, which I felt bad about because up to that point, I'd always used like. Going back to your question about quirky basses, I've always liked the idea, especially after that moment, by the way, when I kind of, you know, affirmed that, like, no, you know, I was using all kinds of stuff, like, and it would usually be, like, cheaper stuff, like, you know, Farida things, and I always like to go for things that weren't, I've never been into, like, Squire and Epiphone, you know, things that actually are a cheaper version of the real thing kind of thing. People see them that way. You know, I've always liked these other names that just aren't anything else, you know. It's like Richwood. There isn't like a more expensive version. It just is it.
Yeah, there's a lot of Japanese... K, is that the name? There's from the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of Japanese random brands like Gaiatone and K, and they were bringing out these instruments that were just their own things that someone in the factory came up with, and that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know... so, like, yeah, and I'd always kind of champion these things, because I always like the idea... that people could, if say they like what I was doing and they like the tone I was getting in my videos and stuff, so, you know, that it was tangible that they could go and buy that thing, you know, like, well, how much are they? Well, like 150 quid, really? You know, and they could go and get one, and you know, it wasn't like, oh, I can't wait till I can afford that £2,000 thing you're playing there, you know. So I felt a bit rotten, really, because then I'm all of a sudden using this handmade boutique, tone wood, beautiful, you know, thing that I've designed. You know, and I thought they're going to hate me, you know. But in reality, people really, really loved the bass. You know, they were like, well, what is that? I said, well, it's the thing I've designed, and where can I get one? And I'm like, you can't. There aren't any, you know. You can get Brian to build one for you. You know, and Brian had said, you know, if anyone wants one making, I'll make another, and he probably said, I'll give you a little bit of a, you know, licensing commission or something. But you know, £2.5 grand, that's a lot of money for people to spend, and so we didn't really, that never really took off. There have been some made. In the end, I don't know when this came, but there were that many emails I got, that much interest in the bass, that I actually felt like almost like a duty, you know, to try and have it made, to try and make it happen. I thought, if I can do it some way. And this is where Chowney came in. I had seen Chowney when he first was developing his CHB1, which is his like semi-acoustic thing, right at the beginning of Chowney. They're based in Bristol. So, not going to lie, my first connection with him was like, hi, I'm Scott Whitley. I play with the Animals. You know, give me a free bass. No, I didn't say that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
You know that we'll do it. Those kind of like you know, sort of touting around. And anyway, I ended up like he actually did me a great artist deal, and I ordered one of the first batch of 12 of his basses, which was a Shortscale, and it was perfect for the Animals. That's, you know, because that's that 60s kind of sound, and that was that. And then we had a few emails and things like that. We became quite friendly and stuff. And I just thought, I remember I was sat in the studio, actually. I was doing a bit of engineering on this day where I decided to give it a go. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to call up Stephen Chown or email him and say, you know, look, I'm thinking about doing this. You've done it already, you know, like, tell me to get stuff, but, you know, where do I start? Would you be up for helping share your experience so far? And it turns out, what a lovely guy, you know, because what he did, he said, let me give you a call, what's your number? And he called me up, and he just basically shortcut me right to the factory that he was using, right?
Cool.
Do you know? He just said, like, use these guys, I've tried these, I've had about 11 made, some of them were great, some of them were like firewood, you know. But he said, I'm really happy, they'll do like small runs, you know, you don't need to like order 100 and stuff. You know, the pricing is this and that and all the rest of it. And so I over the period of a year, we toed and fro, me and the factory. You know, I sent them my plans, and then they'd ask loads of questions, and then finally we get a prototype sent over, and then I'd kind of make revisions. Right, you need to do this. Really hard, by the way, with the language barrier.
Yeah,
it's really hard.
Is this in Indonesia? This factory is it?
This was China. This was China. Okay. Because great instruments were coming out of China and still are. You know, like those Chinese Fenders, like phenomenal instruments. Like, you know. So anyway, it took about a year to get it right, or where I was like completely happy with it. There were 4 prototypes made actually, and there's still great basses. There's still people who got them out there who I know actually. But yeah, finally got it where I was like, that's it, let's go. A friend of mine helped me put a bit of an ad together, and I put them up for pre-order. And I thought, you know, maybe 7 or 8 might go, something like that. But in the first month, 42, I think.
Class.
Went, right. Yeah, I was like, what?
No pressure packing them up for being sent out to people. Like, put them in a good bit of cardboard and a bit of bubble wrap.
It was really scary. I mean, I ended up with like, you know, I've always been like a struggling musician, and like my account had like, I don't know, 50 grand in it or something. I'm like, what the Dickens is going on here, you know?
The bank's ringing you. What's going on? Did you have to steal someone? Robbing a bank or something?
That's really weird. But it turns out, I mean, like another story. I mean, you know, like I think I spoke to you about, like, I recently got diagnosed with ADHD, but the only reason I mentioned that is because, you know, I was just going for it, you know, just like plunging in there. And then, you know, there was that moment of like, wait a minute, you know, like, I've got all this money of these, and then I've got to pay it to the factory.
Yeah. And
then, I don't know, what happens if they all sink or something in the ocean on the way? Do you know what I mean? This stuff just wasn't coming into...
Or if they're all faulty, and then you have 50 bases that are crap, and 50 grand you owe people.
Yeah, it was, you know... But that's the thing, I just kind of went for it, and I believed in it, and, you know, and it was bloody scary. It was, I'm not going to deny. And so no capital, it was all done on pre-order. But it went really well, and then things arrived, you know, and there were, like, issues, like there was intonation issues, for example, like some of the bolts on the bridges were too short, so I had to, like, buy in some bolts. Just little things I had to do, but it adds up, you know, it was a lot of work. All the people that ordered active ones, I fitted the preamp in-house. Okay. I thought it was easier if I just ordered them all passive and stuff. So there was a lot of work involved. You know, I did all the setups, like filing the nuts down, getting the truss rods right. A few of them, I wasn't happy with the fretwork, so I had Brian, you know, shoot the frets, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly, you know. So I wanted these things to go out so that people picked them up. Because I've always been a believer, you know, in like, setup is like 90% of what makes an instrument great.
Same.
You know?
I was just setting up, I had 15 bases for this course I'm doing, and I'd unboxed them all and set them up, and they were good to go. But I think these days out of the factory, they're pretty well set up. But when you order them, maybe the ones coming out of China weren't set up to play out of the box as much as they are at the moment. Like,
exactly, and that's the thing. I think that, again, you know, like price scale, you know, when you're paying, you know, like for example, Warwick are generally quite expensive basses, and I've had a bunch of Warwicks. And apart from, they all have the same thing, by the way. They all they've all had the truss rod slightly bowed, which I'm just assuming is from manufacturer to reaching the customer. You know, they've kind of settled down. And after that, I've never had a bad fret on a Warwick, or you know what I mean? Like, you know, whereas when you're paying for the cheaper stuff, that's the bit that's missing. It's that kind of QC, that kind of fine detail. So that's the bit I put in myself.
Yeah.
You know, and I just wanted people to kind of get these things out of the box and go, my God, this is the best thing I've ever played, you know?
Yeah.
I genuinely wanted people to get that experience, and, you know, and that was the lovely thing. They started going out to the customers. And it was just a mad thing where they were saying this. They were like, this is the best thing I've ever played, a lot of them. They were saying, thanks so much. You know, this is what I've been looking for all these years, you know, and I just couldn't find it, and then you've made it happen. And it was like really lovely. Do you know what I mean? A lovely experience to have, you know, to have made that happen. The first batch I didn't make a penny on, by the way.
Really? There was no markup. You didn't have a markup or
well, I thought I did, you know. I thought I did. But then I think I ended up Yeah, I think I ended up like getting them shipped by air to make it a bit quicker. And because sea takes forever, and they'd already been waiting a long time.
2 months at least, like with Ali Direct and those things, like.
Yeah, and then when they arrived, there's like obviously there's VAT on the goods, but there's also VAT on the shipping. I think there's VAT on the insurance for the shipping.
Oh
it's just mad. There was so everything went. I was like, oh, okay.
You got a bit of a shock when you saw that. You were like, oh, there's a nice little profit margin there. Saying to the wife, you know what, we might go on a sun holiday with this profit from the bases.
Yeah, but not to be. But I did just about break even. I mean, because I think I spend a lot on advertising as well at one point, with like Google AdWords, probably $1,000 or something, whatever. And so, but like I say, I certainly broke even, and I made the base out there, I kind of made people aware of it. And so you could say it was just a big advertising campaign, I guess. What I'm saying is seeing a positive. And then I carried on doing it for about 12 months, and I think I sold something in the region of 150 to 100, might be even 170 bases over.
That's a lot of work.
It was amazing.
Between getting them to you, setting them up, like that's probably was a crazy amount of work, like, and posting them out, talking to the people when there's that many people involved, like.
Yeah, it was nuts, and. Like I had a unit that I used for teaching and stuff, a little, like little space I rented, and I was like almost living there. There was a settee in their couch, and sorry, I don't know why I had to explain what a settee was, and I'd like sometimes I'd be there till like 1 a.m. I can't do anymore, and I'd just crash on this couch,
oh my God. And
then get up and carry on. I didn't see my wife. She was working full time, and it was just insane. And I was touring at this time with Big Country as well, and trying to do a bit with my YouTube channel and stuff. And it was like, it's not sustainable, this.
You're burning at both ends, like, and it was going to just go too far, really, like.
Yeah. And then the other thing that people don't see when you do things like that, like I really, really admire anyone that takes on a project like that, because the problems, the constant issues that you hit, whether it's shipping or supplies or, like I don't know, I got a one batch of bases come through, and I think like nearly half of them, that's right, there was some cock up with the order where they sent a bunch of fretless bases, and I only ordered like 2. They thought it was 20 or something like that. I'm like, oh God. So I had to have each one of those fretless necks, fretted, which took all the profit margin out of it. And, it's just mad things. One turned at one time and it was just like, the wrong shape. It was like, what's that? Like it shifted when it was in the CNC machine or something, So it was very hard, and I really, really would not send anything out substandard. It had to be like, absolutely bang on. So a lot of the times I'd just kind of be really honest and put them up as, like almost like B stock. This one's slightly the wrong shape, or it's the. So at the end of all that, I thought, well, it seems a shame to just kill it off. There's definitely an interest in this thing, but I can't keep doing this. So my 2 options really were to train somebody up to set them up and things, and pay them a little bit of a wage or like a piece, per item thing. I know like my wife was okay to get involved with some of the admin stuff. So it was either kind of do that or now see if somebody will take it on, and then maybe like pay me like a licensing fee or something, because I really had a thing now. It was actually happening. It was, so the most obvious guy to get in touch with was Stephen Charon, because he kindly put me in touch with, the factory. Around this time, coincidentally, a factory in India had got in touch with me, a manufacturer, to say, we'd love to build your base, right? So I was like, well, that's interesting. And it was one of those things, the stars kind of aligned kind of thing, and I got in touch with Stephen. Would you be interested in taking on the SWB one under the Charity brand? And he was like, absolutely. It's like, it's we've proved you've proved there's a market for it and stuff, and you've got a following. So we came to an arrangement we're really happy with, but it all hinged on getting the cost price right, because there wasn't any margin. I told you there was hardly any margin in it. And then, without going into obviously too much detail, but the factory in India, we'd seen some of their work and it looked really, really good, right? So I was able to return the favour. I said, look, funny enough, there's this factory in India. They've been in touch with me. Let me put you in touch with them. And and we had he had a couple of samples made, and really the quality was insane. It was so good. And the deal that he got, because he was like having all these bases made there, made there be enough so that he could pay me a little licensing fee, and that's it. And that's what's happening now. So they're now made in India. You can order them from if you just type in Chowny base, there is a supply issue at the minute, so that might be why you can't find them. It's because of COVID, but it's happening. They're coming back. My advice would be to jump on the Chowny website and write a message if someone's interested in them, and just say like, where's the best place to go and when are they going to be next available?
And how much did they retail about in the end? Roughly what was the retail price?
I think they ended up about. I think when I was doing, they were like $399 for a passive and like $499, because that's the other thing. Bearing in mind my thing with like people being able to afford them, I wanted them to be affordable. I wanted it to be one that was like £200, but it just wasn't in the cards. I'm good, I'm nice, but I can't afford to give. There's a bass and there's £200. You know what I mean?
If you win the lotto, you could do that. Like,
yeah, I will do. But anyway, and they're not that much more than that now. The active and the passive have like homogenized into one thing now. So it's or morphed into one. So it's like every one you buy now is an active with a passive pull. And that literally gives you the best of both, because when you pull the tone control, that engages the tone control in passive mode. When you pop it back in, it's fully active. So, and I think they're maybe just over 500 now. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I don't get involved in that side of it. But yeah, they've not really gone up that much, throughout all this. But they may have to. I don't know. I don't know if Stephen will see this or hear it. But yeah, I don't know.
The short scale market has become more competitive though in the last year. Like I remember, when I bought a Rumble Cat. Did you ever see the Epiphone Rumble Cat? It's Alan Woody's signature. Love it. But when I was buying that, there wasn't a lot of short scales out there. But Sire just brought out a short scale. Music Man just brought out a short. Like everyone is doing it now. Like, so it's more competitive, definitely at the moment.
It is, and I don't know. People have said this to me. I don't know if it's a thing. They said it's your fault, and I'm like, it could be, because you couldn't sell them. You couldn't. What I mean is, you approached manufacturers back then, and you couldn't give the idea away. And yet everybody's like in on the act now, and it's fair to say that until we started doing this SWB1, there wasn't anything filling that niche, and now it's gone nuts. So I don't know. Maybe Chowny and I raised a little bit of awareness about the short scale thing being more viable, if you like. But yeah, it's definitely gone. It's definitely a thing now. It's a growing thing. The secret's out.
No, definitely. Hopefully the interest in them will translate into more sales of your base, like, because it still is different to the other ones. The bigger brands are kind of just bringing out not like a new design. It's just a short scale version of their Stingray or their whatever. Yeah. So your one still does stand out as kind of unique.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah. So yeah, fingers crossed. It's just been a weird time overall. Nobody knows how it's going to go now, but yeah, I'm sure sure the future's going to be bright.
Oh, definitely. We have to stay positive.
Yeah. That's it.
You touched briefly on, you were saying, because I remember you put up a video, I think it was about 2 months ago, you were looking for new students, but you briefly touched on your diagnosis of ADHD. And so that happened during this quarantine lockdown period, and how is that affecting like your future plans? You said you find yourself more focused and you're able to say, I want to do this for the next 9 months, and you're actually following through instead of being, like a rabbit, or you get confused, like a magpie. Oh, there's something shiny, I'm going doing that. I think a lot of people can relate to that, who mightn't even have a diagnosis of ADHD, like.
Yeah, life changing is a word I've used a few times, but I use it genuinely. And this was one of the, this was a life changing thing in that. I think a lot of people, creative people, I don't think it's common knowledge, have mental issues, issues with depression. It kind of goes with the territory, and I think most people accept that. Highs and lows and things like that, maybe not relating to people who aren't in the arts and things like that sometimes. But for me, I mean, I've like that is a great example, the SWB one, when I kind of like did the thing and did the pre-order thing and just made it happen. It just didn't. That was it. That was my focus. I just went down. I wasn't like thinking, yeah, but hang on. Just kind of like get that drive and go. So that's like the good part of it. But the problem with that is that I was so like tunnel visioned, that everything else goes out of the window. And the other problem with that is that it's always been an issue where I kind of like, I can't sustain things, so I'll use the YouTube channel as an example. I remember the early days of like, Scott's bass lessons and people like that. And, he was always, Scott Devine, he was always kind of I was like looking at what he was doing, and thinking, right, he's doing well. What's he, and I would sort of use him as a kind of something to aspire to. But this is before it went insane, right?
Yeah,
This is like early days. And, a bit like the thing I was talking about, with those few bass players, and maybe I could do, I was kind of like, yeah, I think I can do this, and maybe I can turn it into something bigger. And then he just exploded, and that's that. And, people will say, why don't you do that? You could do that. You're like, you've got talent, But the little voice inside me almost, I don't mean that literally. That's another illness. But was kind of saying, yeah, you can't sustain that. You'll do it for like a month, and then you'll be like, what have I done? And you won't be able to do it anymore. And, you'll be into like, I don't know, mountaineering or something. And, and it's true, it's always held me back. It's always been, a frustration.
It's a double-edged sword, really. It drives you to be successful at that thing, but then you get distracted. So it's like two ends of it, really, isn't there? Like,
it is, but the thing is, until recently, I've always had this thing and not known what it is, and of course, then it creates depression, or you're feeling down because you're like, why am I like this? Why am I not achieving what this guy or that guy's doing, or this gal or that girl? And you start to think, how talented do I need to be? What is it? And it's a terrible, it's like it's a double-edged sword. You've got the creativity and you've got the drive and you've got the ideas, but then, you kind of, you don't keep on track and, and so I thought, I don't know, over the years I thought maybe it's like a mild bipolar or something, maybe it's something like that, because when I felt down, I just felt like I couldn't do anything, Yeah. And a lot of this has been under the surface. Most people wouldn't really know it was happening. It's all like internal or at home, if you like. My wife certainly knows what's going on. And then, it was like last year, and it's so actually what I should back up a little bit. Touring, right? Touring, I think, is the perfect antidote, it turns out, for ADHD. because the thing with ADHD is that you constantly need to be doing new, exciting things, right? It's like your dopamine system doesn't work properly. So if you're just not doing anything, if you're just like, what are you doing today? Well, I've got to like mop the floor and you actually feel sad. You feel kind of depressed. And then you start doing this stuff and it makes you feel worse. You're like, my God, I'm going to cry. I'm mopping the floor.
Is this what real life is?
Yeah, it's just so like hence the constant need to like. I've always been adventuring, and so touring has been great, and that's where the photography came in. By the way, it was like bring that into the mix. Now, just flipping back to current times, because that had all stopped. A lot of my symptoms, a lot of the way I used to feel was coming back. It was hitting me more than it had done in a while. And, and I remember, like, having a Skype lesson. This is before I put the appeal thing out to get more students. I had a couple I taught already, and I remember having a Skype lesson on this Thursday or whatever at 2 p.m. and thinking, as I always did when I had a lesson, right, well, I can't really do anything today because I've got that lesson, right? And I think, why am I thinking this way? That's 1 hour in an entire day, and yet I'm writing the day off because I can't think of doing anything else because I've got this lesson, that right? So I Googled that. I just Googled, can only focus on one thing per day. And it threw ADHD up. I'm like, ADHD? What's that got to do with anything? That's that label that they give to, naughty kids or something, Yeah, that's what I thought ADHD was, right? And then I kind of, click on it, read an article, watched a video, watched another video. Within an hour, I 100% knew that I'd lived my life with ADHD, and I was like, WTF, you know what I mean?
Did you feel like you could forgive yourself maybe for, you might have kicked yourself over certain things over the years that you got distracted and didn't follow through, and now when you read this, you were thinking, you kind of gave yourself that absolution. You were like, there was a reason why I was doing that, and I shouldn't have been kicking myself so hard.
Yeah, it was massive. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I could look back things to when I was at school, just everything fell into place. I'm like, oh my God, really? So, I should just quickly throw in the great news as I saw it was that the thing I kept reading about was the medication for ADHD, which is like stimulant medication, is effective. And when I say effective, really effective in 80+% of cases, right? So that was the what? And it wasn't like mood stabilizers, I feel sorry for people that have to have, those kind of medications, but it does help. But the thing is with ADHD meds, the stimulant type, is it's effective within minutes, I don't know, half an hour or something. So from never being medicated, in half an hour, you're getting the effects of it, right, when you take it. So I was like, this is mad, right? And people were talking about, the film Limitless, where the guy takes the tablet and then he's like, no way,
It's like all the neurons in his brain are connecting. He now has access to 100% of his brain.
That's it, and the people were describing it as almost, not as severe as that, but almost that like a switch, And I was like, this is the most incredible, exciting thing I couldn't believe it, so I couldn't wait to get on the meds. But of course there was that, which is odd because a lot of people were saying, have you thought about, there's this diet you can do and there's this, and that, I'm not being sarcastic there but for me, I'm like, are you kidding? I want that tablet. Where is it? You know what I mean? If there's something I could take, I've been with this for 50 years, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can understand if you've been on it, on the med since you're 17 and you think, I wonder if there's a natural way I can, But for me, it was like, dude, give me the tablet, let's try it, And,
sometimes there's a holistic approach to things, but sometimes science, I don't know if you ever watched Homeland, and the show portrays the woman, she's bipolar, but in the show, they show how she got electroshock therapy and it really helps her, because these days they actually do use electroshock a lot to help people. But because of movies and the way it portrays it, people think that, my God, it's like Jack Nicholson in that film, getting the electroshock. But you really have to just follow the science. Sometimes the holistic approach will work, but obviously for you, the science was the way forward.
Well, that was the thing. It was like, and by the way, I'm not at all I am actually taking both approaches. I'm changing my diet. I'm trying to do, but for me, it's more maybe that'll give me even more effect. But the way the medication was described, I thought this is really great, right? Is because people have an issue with taking things. So I'll have to take it forever, really. If I stop taking it, I'm just how I was before. It's not like made a change or something. Yeah. It's just, you take the medication, and while it's effective, it's doing what it does. And then when you stop taking it, you're back to square one, right? Except, like I say, I can change my diet, and I can recognize why I do certain things. I can make more of a conscious decision to change that behavior. It's not as easy as that sometimes, but Just knowing, at least you know why you're doing it, you know. So yeah, I'm doing both really, and it's not that I'm hoping that the holistic thing will take place of the medication. I'm just hoping that it'll help even more, you know. That'll be even a better version of me. So, but that period in between getting diagnosed, which was really expensive. I mean, it was like I decided I did a lot of research. I don't suppose this kind of thing exists, but I didn't want to go with a practice that would be happy to take your money just to tell you you've got ADHD, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I wanted the truth.
Mm-hmm. There was probably a feeling as well. There was probably a fear as well. I'll go for this now, and they'll tell me I don't have it, and now I have no explanation for why I am the way I am.
That's it. Which, kind of depressing to think that way, but at the same time, that's where I was anyway, you know, because I'd kind of been down those roads of like trying to get help, and I'd just kind of given up really. And but like I say, maybe the fact I was touring and everything was helping out, maybe it had kept it at bay for a long time. But yeah, you know, so anyway, all I'm saying is I didn't look for the most expensive, obviously, you know, diagnosis. I just went with reviews, and I found this place. The guy who I was going to be dealing with was like an expert in that field, who actually was a big believer in the holistic stuff as well, which I think is unusual in the, you know, in that profession. So, you know, long story short, the waiting list for NHS are up to 7 years, right? Oh so God. For me personally, yeah, you know, at 50, right? It's like, I'm not even joking. Like, you know, I might be dead then. You know, there's too much of the life I've got left, right? So I had to go private, and I couldn't not go. Now I know there's this potentially this medication that's going to change my life like that, right? Mm-hmm. So it was like £1,000. You know, it was like £600 for the.
Which isn't really. It seems like a lot of money, but it's not when it's something that's so life changing and so important.
Exactly that. You know, exactly that. So so that period in between getting diagnosed and getting the meds, because I had to have medicals. You know, I had to have like blood pressure and. You know, like a load of blood work done and stuff just to check everything was okay. It's not like it's a really dangerous thing to take, but it can just raise your blood pressure a little bit and stuff, so they need to know you're in good shape. And, but that period in between, yeah, you know, I'm just saying this in case it happens to anybody else or has. You know, here I am, age 50, now I get diagnosed, now I've got an explanation for all this stuff, now I've got the chance of this meds that's going to help. I'm thinking... Why 50? Why not when I was like 17?
Yeah.
What could my life have been like, you know? You know, what opportunities have I missed? What job could I have been doing now? How much money could I have kept in the bank?
You could say that, but you could also say, would I have been as tunnel visioned with my bass playing if I had been at that young age on the medication? You just the roads diverge in many ways. Like you can't really tell what would have happened, can you? Like.
You can't. You're absolutely bang on with that. You know, it's and I call it, you know, it is definitely a blessing and a curse is ADHD. It's actually wonderful. I wouldn't want to be any other way in many ways. It's like, you know, and it's that diverse thinking that you do, and you always like find, you know, other ways, which again probably ties in with like me playing quirky basses and just looking at different ways to do things. Like, it's just what makes me tick, you know, it's what makes a lot of ADHDers tick. And that side of it's wonderful, and you know, some of the spontaneity as well. I mean, like we just, you know, Jan and I, my wife, you know, we'll, I'll just kind of go, she'll go to Paris tomorrow, you know, like, yeah, let's do that, you know, and you just do it, you know, it's great.
And yeah, do you still have access to that side of yourself now that you're on the medication? Will you still have that spontaneity, like, or would that be curtailed a little bit?
So it is, yeah. This is the one thing that I think puts a lot of people off. I'd say it is curtailed a little bit. You know, when I'm taking the meds, it's and bearing in mind that you, when you're not medicated, you need to do those things to keep the dopamine levels where you feel okay. You know, it's not like you know, it's not like full on adrenaline junkie stuff. But it's kind of that vibe, you know. It's like, you know, if you're doing like cool new stuff and, you know, you're fine. But if you stop, and with the meds, what I find is that I'm able to do the boring stuff much more easily. You know, I'm able to. I do, arguably hyper focus that, you know, on one thing at once, even more if I'm not careful than when I'm not, but I can hyper focus on things, if you like, that matter a bit more, that are actually going to be, you know, important and fruitful, you know, like fixing things in the house, you know, rather than like, you know, my latest thing, which just before I got diagnosed, it's really funny, right, was pointy headstock basses. I never really liked them at all. And then it was just a thing. I was like, yeah. And I ended up with about 8, you know, eBay bargains, you know, like Jacksons and all that.
That little shed of yours must be fairly full of pointy basses.
Well, it was, yeah. You know, but with the point being, put it again.
The pun master himself.
I'll say it anyway. The point being that, you know, instead of it being those silly things, it can be like you know, really boring things like I fitted a ventilation system to the house, you know, that we had problems with damp. So like, whereas most people might get those things that you put on your windowsill, you know, that like, you know, absorb moisture, those little moisture traps. You know, I fitted an entire ventilation system to the house with heat recovery.
A lot of satisfaction in doing something like that. Self-satisfaction when it's finished, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I did. You know, I always do things like myself and cheaply. But the point being, I'm able to use that stuff more productively. Mm-hmm. You know, which is great. So yeah, it's not. You know, and sorry, just to go back to your point. I find I have to make more effort to do fun stuff now. It sounds really bonkers, right? But because it was what I did all the time before, right? Just to feel okay. Now I've actually got to make the effort to go, you know, we really should, like, go for a walk and take the camera. Like, I've not taken my camera out for, like, a year, you know. I mean, I think lockdown's got a lot to do with that, you know. But, you know, it's almost like I've got to force myself to do fun things when I'm on the medication. So it's, you know, that's...
Well, what you're like 51 now. You've known yourself in a certain way for 51 years, and now you're finding a new you. I'm thinking of this kind of like, I don't know what the PC term is. Would you call it a condition? Would that be the word that they'd use for
a
ADHD?
Syndrome? Yeah, condition syndrome. Yeah.
I find with these things is, if you want to take a guitar analogy, your personality is like your signal coming out of the bass. That's true. That's what it is. And the syndromes are like an effects pedal that gets put after the chain and it changes you in a certain way. But at the end of the day, your personality is the main signal. And when you take these medications, it's like you're turning down the amount of the syndrome that's affecting your personality, maybe. Yeah,
that's a great way of looking at it, you know. But, you know, a positive of it, you know, like a definite plus, is that I've always been, excuse me, you know, if I got like a session or something, like if I'm laying a part down for someone, I'd probably get like kind of not bored, but before long I'd be like, well, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's the best I can do, you know. Mm-hmm. Whereas I've done a few sessions after being medicated, right, and it's like, arguably a bad thing, but I'll spend a lot more time on it, you know, getting something I'm really, really happy with. And then I like give them like another take of like, well, this is what I do if it was my song. So I do all do you know what I mean? Like the stuff that I might not, you know. So that focus, you know, that ability to really put the fine detail, I guess. You know, I'm adding the fine detail in that I would get lost previously. Mm-hmm. So that's definite plus. You know, that's a huge thing, and I really attribute that to the meds helping out. But they don't really like. I don't think they really change your personality. Some people feel dull on them, or this and the other. But I don't think that's the case. Really, you know, really impressed. The only thing I will say about the whole experience. And at some point, I've got to get behind some kind of like ADHD awareness.
I was about to say that, Jay. You probably want to maybe tell your story to other people so they can maybe think about themselves and get their own tests, maybe, because they might be in a similar situation.
Yeah, exactly that. And, you know, right off the bat, I'd say to anyone that's like kind of in a situation where they feel like they might be, but they're not that desperate to spend, you know, all the money I did on you know, which I think's worth it, by the way, because I think long term, right? I think long term the productivity, you know, and quite frankly, you know, the saving on spending money on like stupid new hobbies and stuff. You know what I mean?
I know, yeah.
You know, yeah. And pointy headstock bases. It's going to.
You've already spent a few a nice bit of money on them. More than £1,000
you know.
anyway.
Exactly. So what I would say is, if you're in that place, like get straight in there. If you're in the UK, like for example, you know, get straight in there with the NHS and try and get a referral. There's a place called Psychiatry UK, actually, that you should check out because they're really good at helping with people get NHS referrals and stuff quicker. You know, there is something they can do now that's a lot quicker. But the reason I mention this is, 7 years is way too long for anyone. This happens to kids, right? When they're like 4, they get referrals, and then they have to do this sometimes 7 years.
Terrible.
Waiting. I mean,
like you've had your most forming life experiences, and you haven't had your diagnosis. Like,
no, it's outrageous. I can't even get my head around it. But of course, and then if you go private, it's too expensive for a lot of people. You know, I honestly thought there was no option. I thought even after I sell God knows what, I've got to do it, right? Yeah. But here's the bit where it's a nightmare, and why I really want to get behind the awareness is I'm stuck now where I got my private diagnosis. The report is like incredibly in depth. It's like 11 pages long, right? It talks. And it's not something that just happens like that. You know, there were forms filled in from my wife, you know, from my mum and dad, you know, they take everything into account. And as it turns out, I got actually diagnosed with severe combined, which is like there's 2 types of ADHD, right? I was like, okay. And but the thing is, I've got all that in place. So I now officially have a proper diagnosis from one of the top guys in his field. And I'm now paying close to £200 a month for medication and prescriptions, right? Well, I can't sustain that. I mean, you saw the appeal I put out about, you know, needing more teaching to pay the bills and all the rest of it, you know, because of the current situation with no work. And that's just added to it. I mean, it's just, I can't, I'm in such a, you know, it's a catch-22 because if I don't have the meds, then maybe I'm not going to be as productive. It shouldn't be that way.
No.
And the thing is, what should happen is you can then go to your GP and say, right, I've got this diagnosis, and you do this kind of shared care thing, right? So the psychiatrist, he's done the titration, he's sorted out what meds you need to be on, and then the GP prescribes them, right? But what's happening is the GPs are going, no, we can't prescribe that. And that's it, right? You know, like, hang on. So you have to go back and pay, you know.
So there's no kind of generic version of your drug that you can take, which would be like 50 cent or whatever. Like, that's how cheap these generics are. Like, you can't get a generic version of your one.
No, you mean the meds? I mean, it's a controlled substance in this country. So, you know, you can't. Yeah, you've got to get a prescription every month for a start. You can't get a repeat one. So, yeah. Anyway, long story short, those guys at Psychiatry UK, they can help with the process, and that's where I'm at the minute. So hopefully, you know, I'll get some help with that, and yeah. So yeah, it's and that's why I want to get behind the awareness, because it's just the whole thing is shocking. Some people believe it's not real, you know, they just think it's laziness, or you know. But I think an authority to say that going undiagnosed and not even knowing what it is to age 50. You know, I could tell you it's real, you know.
Yeah.
It's very real.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. Like, that's really interesting. Like, it's... And
not at all.
You should do your talk about it, and I'm sure you could inspire, like, people to, even at any age, to go and look into their own diagnosis. But we're kind of... You have a lesson at too, do you? We went a bit... But I want to cover your Indiegogo campaign, your new solo album. That we got to get that in to wrap things up, because I'm not sure exactly what it is. I saw the trailer where you're playing the bass up the mountain and you started to sing, and I know there's a bit of singing on it. You said it was kind of based on an old cassette, so I have a general gist of what's happening with it, but you could probably explain to us exactly what the crack is with your EP.
Yeah, so it's that's the first thing. You can go and support it on Indiegogo. I presume you maybe be able to put the link. It's Indiegogo. whatever. I can't remember. It's really weirdly.
Oh, it'll be in all the links are. I never put a link on the screen because no one is going to type that out. It's all down in the description.
Exactly. So it's it's just again, it's a great success story in terms of one of those great things that's happened during lockdown where people have like done things they probably wouldn't have done normally. And this has been a project that's been on the back burner for like 10 years. And, originally, I'd written tunes that were kind of like I say, for mp3.com back in the day, like instrumental things. But this, the EP, it's kind of like, it kind of embodies everything. I am as a musician, pretty much. I've spent a long time in my career as a professional singer, for example. I don't consider myself to be a singer, but I must be able to carry a tune because I made a decent living of it for a while. So, so there's 2 songs on there and there's 2 instrumentals. But the thing is about it, how can you explain this in words? But I would say that there's a lot of interest there for people who are into bass and stuff. A lot of the guitar work is piccolo bass. It's not guitar. So on the track Trusting Me, which is like the main track, which the video actually might be out tomorrow, which is really cool. All the guitars are piccolo. So that's interesting, like the solo is and all the rhythm guitars. And the, so I'm playing the regular bass as well. There's a lot of bass playing going on, but it's not, how can I put it? It's more, if you think of like bands like Level 42, where there is a lot of bass playing going on, but it's part of the song. It's not like a show. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's not the song.
It's that kind
of part of it, like.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm hoping that it'll appeal to people who like my playing and like bass playing generally, and will be interested in that side of it. But as well, it's a song, and and I'm singing on there. My wife's singing on there. There's some top players on there. There's Christian Madden on Hammond and Fender Rhodes. He plays with Liam Gallagher at the minute, actually. So he's top of his tree. There's a drummer from Wishbone Ash on a track. I've got Mark Brzezicki. Actually, he won't be on the EP. Mark Brzezicki from Big Country Experience on the album later. So yeah, really, really quickly finish. There's loads of playing on there, loads of great playing. Hopefully, the songs appeal to most, and the instrumentals. That again, if you think, I don't know, like was it theme from Axel F? The kind of tuneful instrumentals. There's loads of great playing going on, but it's for everybody, if that makes sense. It's like very accessible stuff. Yeah, really, really excited about that, and. It's one of those that perhaps I'd never thought I'd finish it. I never thought I'd finish it, and yet here I am I've got a full horn section on there. It's just mad. I'm so so pleased with it. So hope you guys like it too.
That's great. Like, so good, seriously good things have come out of all this lockdown crap for you. Like, you with your music and your mental health and everything. Like. There's been seriously. Positives. Obviously, financially, it's tough on all of us, like not being on tour. Like,
financially, it's been a disaster, quite frankly, and I'm going to be a long number of years, as probably many are, paying back, things I've had to borrow and, maybe replacing things I had to sell. I don't know, but at the end of the day, the positives have definitely outweighed the negatives. And I actually should just quickly throw this out there. I've just created a new Facebook page called Musicians Helping Musicians.
Okay.
Right? And I became really aware that, when people like pour their heart out on Facebook, they're having a bad day and they're like, oh, I give up and whatever.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cathartic, isn't it? Because you get that kind of like, wow, I'm the same. And,
Yeah.
And we kind of can't do that really, because we've got to portray this. Because a lot of our Facebook friends might be fans or, and it's not the place for it. And then, well, where is the place? And for me, there wasn't one. There wasn't one where I could is it just me that feels this or that or, So just throwing that, it's a brand new thing. And I'm, I'm not playing a big part in it. I've just kind of set it up and I'm just kind of letting it go. And already people are kind of opening up on there. And it's the first place they've been able to say, I don't know, man, I thought it was just me, and it's a great thing.
Struggling,
so,
like, people are just saying they're struggling, and with all this, I suppose, just being locked in and not being able to be on the road and be creative, because it's really hard to be creative in a vacuum, isn't it? we're kind of realizing our creativity, we feed off other musicians and experiences outside of our 5 kilometers or wherever your lockdown is, you know.
Completely, and probably hence the reason that this conversation's been like 2 hours. You know, it's
yeah, we're like, I need
real person.
Come here, I want to chat. Yeah, like I have to go. I have to go help my father install a water feeder out on the farm, and you've got a lesson.
All right,
he's ringing me there. He's like, "Where the hell are you, you little bollocks?" You say.
Right, yeah, better wrap it up.
No, it was a brilliant conversation. I'm delighted that we had such a long chat, and the full unedited version will be going out. I won't be cutting out any of this. It was thanks so much for coming on. Like, I really appreciate you giving me your time.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you. Like I say, I mean, it has been a pleasure, and it is very cathartic, you know, to talk. You know, I'm not have much chance. So, yeah.
You had a lot to get out.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.